Heat fans weren't too happy with Miami's quiet offseason, but does the national media have a different opinion? We'll answer that on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your everyday podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day, Monday to Friday. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everybody, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. As the dust settled on most of the offseason, media outlets are posting their offseason grades for different teams. CBS Sports gave the Heat a D. Yahoo Sports gave them a D+. Spotrac was a little bit more binary in their rankings. They said either they liked it or they didn't like it. Shockingly, they said they didn't like the Heat's offseason. That was written by our friend Keith Smith, who was on the show, telling us that the Heat were going to do nothing, and then said he didn't like the fact that they did nothing. But what do you think about these grades? Are they fair? Are they too harsh? What's your take on it?
I think it's fair. I could see the lack of movement, and I think the context here is they lost Caleb Martin, and other teams around the East made some changes, and in theory at least have gotten better. Philadelphia in particular, Boston locking up their core, New York adding some players there. Like they've made some changes, and if you're not keeping pace with those other teams in terms of upgrading your roster, then, as you've said many times before, then you're losing that race. And so I can understand that perspective, but then you also get the context that Andy Ellisberg provided, which is that their move was last season at the trade deadline when they acquired Terry Rozier. And if you're looking at the fact that they re-signed Haywood Highsmith, that they've added some nice rookie players, that they're going to be bringing in some guys through the developmental pipeline so that it doesn't look like this is as depleted a roster as it might have been, then I don't think it's quite accurate. I think it's fair. I don't think it's accurate. I think this team is actually better in some regards, and I think they're going to be just fine. I really do believe that. I know Jimmy's a year older. That's my biggest question mark. It really is. Everybody else, I think, is going to have a role, and they're either going to plateau or they're going to improve. I don't think they're going to be significantly worse. But the one player, to me, that this season hinges on the most is Miami's best player, and that's Jimmy Butler. So when you look at it from that perspective, incorporating Terry, having a full season of him at full strength, Tyler Hero entering his prime with something to prove, Bam Adebayo coming off of his stint in Team USA, etc., I think the team's going to be just fine. I really do believe that. Rose-colored glasses, Heat fan, etc. I know I'm hearing it already, but that's what I think.
I think that's fine. If you think that the Heat are going to be fine, then that's fine. But to me, the question is whether or not they had a good offseason or not. And I don't know. It's hard to parse, like, okay, the fact that they were so constricted by their salary cap situation to begin with. And like we said, Keith Smith came on the show and said it's going to be really tough for Miami to do anything. Keith Smith, who studies the CBA, knows it better than anybody that doesn't work for an NBA front office, and maybe even better than some people who work for NBA front offices, works for Spotrac, does all that stuff, said, yep, pretty much y'all are screwed.
Nothing.
And then they didn't do anything, just as Keith predicted. And yet he still said he didn't like the offseason. And yet everybody said, look, CBS Sports, Yahoo, we know it's going to be really hard for Miami to do anything. We still can't give them anything higher than a D+ in one case. And so I think you can like the Heat's team, but still be fair to criticize the off season. I'm going to be honest. I thought all these places that were giving them Ds, I think they were being nice.
Yeah.
I think the D was a sign of respect for the Heat, because if this were the Pistons or the Bulls or something like that, they would get an F, right? All the Heat did, think about this, all they did was lose one of their key rotation players and make a draft pick. That's all they did. But this is more of a result of the last few off seasons and I'm not going to say the last offseasons were failures or successes or whatever, but just the predicament,
Sure.
the predicament that they are in because of the last few offseasons is why this offseason was so inactive. But this offseason was very inactive. And the Heat did in a results-based business. I know that they've been on the phone. They called about Larry Markkinen. They had an offer on the table from Mikal Bridges. All these things. They didn't do anything. They did the very bare minimum any front office could do this summer. And I think the fact that they got a D instead of what is a failing grade is a sign of respect for the Heat's front office.
If I'm looking at that grade, I would have probably graded it out like a C minus, because maybe there seems underwhelming, but basically you lost Caleb Martin and replaced him with Alec Burks, which is, I think, a loss in that regard. But you also added Pelle Larsson and Kelleher. And that being the case, like, it's not...
You made draft picks. We have no idea if those guys are going to be good.
Fair. But you added talent, right? That's something that everybody wants. Did you add superstar talent? No, that wasn't possible. So I would leave it more at like kind of a middling grade. Not great, not A, B, certainly. But to fail would have been to have lost Haywood Highsmith and Caleb Martin, to trade Jimmy Butler for peanuts, picking a direction as good as a lot of fans might have, as many fans might have been calling for that, and maybe even some hosts on this show. I think it would have been much worse for the future of this team, to trade those kinds of personnel.
That's interesting, because if they had traded Jimmy Butler to, let's just call it the Rockets, and had gotten
they would have gotten
one
an
of
A.
their, they would have, right? Like, they definitely would have gotten an A, because that's how the media looks at, like, national media and the people who write these kinds of things, the analytically more inclined people, to say, well, you lost your star player, but you have 2 more first-round picks now.
The future's bright in Miami. They'll be back and bring you the title of South Beach in no time. It's like, really? Jalen Green, I guess.
I will say that. Well, we don't have to. We know your history with Jalen Green, but I will say this. I understand, and maybe this is not fair for me to put it this way, that the Heat were so boxed in this offseason because of where they were with their payroll against that second apron. But it's the front office's job to get creative and figure stuff out. I look at other front offices across the league. What the Dallas Mavericks have done, basically ever since they lost Jalen Brunson, which was a mistake, but every move they've made basically since then has been a win. Everything they've done has worked out. They took a gamble on a guy who was in Europe for a couple of years, but a former lottery pick in Dante Exum played a key role in there. They made the swing. They made the gamble on Kyrie Irving, and man, that worked. And that wasn't something Miami was, or frankly is, willing to do. And and not just to point out the Dallas Mavericks, but there's such a level of creativity across so many front offices right now, where it just feels like the Heat are playing it straight a little too much, where they're like, okay, we either trade our good player in a draft pick to make an upgrade on the roster, or we don't, in the case of like Lowry for Terry Rozier, or we do the best we can on our scouting work, and we've nailed these last first round picks, it seems like. But that's sort of the extent of how this team over the last 3 years has acquired talent. It's just, hey, thank goodness Nikola Jovic, Jaime Jaquez, and perhaps it looks like Kel'el Ware all hit in the first round. Because if it wasn't for those guys, this team has not really done much in the way of adding outside talent outside of Terry Rozier, which again was just sort of a straight trade that didn't require very much creativity at all.
But we've made this point before. Like, that's fine to bring up Dallas, and I'm sure people will say, Boston did the same thing.
The Knicks.
What was the difference? See, I don't know that the Knicks are better. I don't.
But they made moves. We're talking about inactivity.
Okay.
And the Knicks front.
Office has been. Is that what we're talking about? Activity? Like, that's what I mean. Yeah, I guess you trade. Could you have traded Tyler Hero for OG Anunoby? Like, I mean, the way they moved RJ Barrett, like, yeah, but they didn't have Emmanuel Quickly on the roster. That was the difference there. They didn't have
added Jovic or Jaime. And I'm not saying they should have done that, for the record, but my point is,
I don't know that Masai Ujiri wanted that deal.
Yeah, we don't know. We have no idea. Right. I just, all I'm saying is, yes, they have been boxed into a corner, but our job isn't to see the way out of that corner. It's their job. They're the front office. They're the guys getting paid all
but
this money to find the way out of the corner that they put themselves in. And they have not done that.
but those moves, I mean, again, the Knicks are a lateral move to me. Other teams that maybe had improved, like taking those big swings that you talked about, Boston, Dallas, like what do they have there that Miami doesn't have? A top 5, top 10 player. You know, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, like both those guys are sniffing top 10 in some regard. You look at Doncic clearly. I mean, the case for Kyrie Irving varies depending on who you ask. You know, I think he's still a pretty good player.
Or what day of the week? Yeah.
Okay. But either way, like that's the difference. Like Miami has higher level, and I've made this case since the bubble, like going up against the Lakers, and it was a clear victory for the Lakers in terms of like when we were, you know, predicting what the series would look like, the finals would look like. It's like, oh, we've got LeBron and Anthony Davis. It's like, yeah, but Miami's 1 through 7 is better than most teams, and that's kind of what they've done. They've been able to death by 1,000 slices, 1,000 cuts. You know, that's just the way that they've been able to do it because they have better depth than most teams do. You know, their star level talent isn't as good, but their role players are better than most teams. And so that's the key to their success. They bolstered that depth a little bit by acquiring Terry Rozier. They bolstered it by adding, to your point, draft picks. Like, it's just what you can do. You know, the only move available again is to trade for higher level talent. Like if you're saying that maybe activity is the next step for Miami rather than what it's been like for the last couple off seasons, then either trading Jimmy Butler or trading Bam Adebayo are your best paths to achieving that higher level success. And I don't know what that's going to garner. I don't know what that's going to do. It's going to fracture the fan base. Like Bam's probably his value is at an all-time high. What can you get back for a player like Bam Adebayo? I don't know I don't even know what that might look like.
Yeah, I'm not vouching for them to trade Bam. I think that they should probably have explored more seriously trading Jimmy Butler. That doesn't mean I think they should have traded Jimmy Butler. But this whole idea that we just never take this step back as a sort of this weird badge of honor, sometimes that step back is necessary. Sometimes picking a direction is good. Now, maybe they're just not going to do it this summer. Maybe they do it next summer. I don't know. But, you know, all I'm saying is I think it's totally fair that they got D's across the board. And like I said, I thought it was a sign of respect for everything that this front office and this organization has accomplished that they didn't get an F. I mean, I hear every argument that you're making, but this team did the very bare minimum of what a front office could do. And I don't see how that's not an F. If your whole goal is we've been in the play-in tournament 2 years in a row, the rest of the East is getting better, shouldn't we ought to try to get better? And they didn't, you know? Like they didn't.
I mean,
so
there's no argument for that.
To me, it's an
but
F.
At the same time, they couldn't have done anything else. They tried to get better last year and they got hurt. It's a circle. It's a circular argument that can't be disproven or won. And it's just, you know,
the playoff grade, by the way, the offseason grade means nothing in terms of what ends up happening in the regular season. We're just debating the grades here, you know?
Yeah. I mean, Kyle Lowry's acquisition was an A+ move around the league from these same media outlets that are giving Miami.
Well, CBS Sports, and it might have been the same writer. I wanted to double check on that.
Sam Quinn.
I think it was Sam Quinn who gave the who I like, by the way, but he gave the Sixers an A+ for trading away Jimmy Butler and getting Josh Richardson, and the Heat like a C- for acquiring Jimmy Butler in the summer of 2019. So these offseason
star.
Right. And you know, the NBA, I make this joke all the time, but like NBA Twitter's favorite player is the guy who can shoot 36%, defend 3 positions, and not dribble. That's NBA Twitter's favorite player. That's why Robert Covington, if you base Robert Covington's career based on Twitter, he's a Hall of Famer. There's not anybody on NBA Twitter who doesn't love Robert Covington or didn't like 5 years ago.
We should do that. NBA Heat Twitter Hall of Fame. Like which guys?
I actually made a list recently about the NBA Twitter, all NBA Twitter team, but more current, not the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame would be great. We could do a whole pyramid. It's like a whole Bill Simmons book on it. It'd be fun.
What was it? Briante Weber.
Oh,
that guy is Heat
All-timer.
Twitter Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
that guy.
Yeah,
he's got his own wing.
If only they kept him. FanDuel posted their over/under win totals, and I think there's money to be made on the Heat, despite them failing on the offseason. I'll tell you why after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. We all love sports. We're here because we love sports. We love them so much we never want them to stop, but the playoffs have wound down. You get fewer games in the sports. Well, they're just not sportsing the way you want them to. But FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want, because all you've got to do is open the app and you can dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Miami Heat talk every day, 5 days a week. The best way to support the show is to hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow us on your podcast app. Download us on your podcast every day. All right. FanDuel came out with their over-unders, and this is always something I like to look at because it kind of gives you a sense of where these teams are going to fall, and they're usually, for like 80% of these, they're pretty on point for the most part. Last year, the Heat were at 46.5 wins, right? And they finished the year with less than that, right? 46 wins, exactly. So they came in on the under, but just barely. So they were pretty accurate in terms of figuring out where Miami was going to be.
Yep. But when you look at it that perspective, like, again, an offseason of not having acquired anything and having gone through the litany of injuries that they did, and they still matched Vegas's predicted total, like, they were off.
Well, unless Vegas was predicting injury to an old and small team. This is a team that's mostly injured, right? I think Vegas baked some of that in. Maybe not to the degree, right? But
fair enough. It's possible, but yeah, I mean, that was a hell of a. Well, I mean, it's Vegas. I was gonna say it's a hell of a gamble, but yeah, it paid off because they were right.
Vegas knows things, man. So this year they were basically spot on last year. This year, FanDuel has them at 44.5 wins, so dropping the Heat after a D- offseason here. What do you think? 44.5.
I mean, Caleb Martin, 2 wins over replacement, I guess. No, by the way, we keep joking about it. I keep joking about it specifically, but I mean, it's not like we're besmirching Caleb Martin's impact at all. But Miami has been able to weather the storm of losing key role players, Gabe, Max, etc. I think they'll be just fine. They'll be able to. Somebody else will step up because they're going to have to. Because either they're going to face injury or because roles change and things will be different. But as far as the win total is concerned, I'm taking the over on that. I think they're going to be better than that, even as other teams have improved because I think Miami's gone better. I think they're going to be able to do things a little bit different. I thought they were fine last year. I thought last year they had a better team than the year before when they went to the NBA Finals because they added Jaime, because they were keeping this core together, because they had Nico, being able to develop Josh Richardson coming back in the fold. Like, so much went badly last year when you think about it. And Miami was depending on two-way guys to have significant impact. And I just, as good as the two-way guys might be this season, I think it would be better if they didn't play, because that would indicate that, one, Miami is healthy, and two, they're getting production from the guys that they should be getting.
I hope they never play. I hope those two-way guys don't see a minute. Like,
we love you, Kashad, but you know what?
Next year's your year, buddy.
Balls.
Yeah. I'm with you. I would go over on this, and I would feel really good about it. 44.5 wins. So that is winning 54.2% of your games. Since the Jimmy Butler era, the Heat have won, and I'm using percentages here because COVID and different shortened seasons. So since Jimmy Butler joined the team in 2019, the Heat have won 60.3% of their games, 55.6%, 64.6%, 53.7%, and 56.1% of their games. So they've only ever come in around this once. 2022-23, when they actually went to the finals, 53.7% of the time, and now they're predicting 54.2%. So generally speaking, the Heat have always won more than 54% of their games during the Jimmy Butler era, and that's with a lot of different kinds of supporting casts. That's like a lot of mixing and maxing. That's a lot of injuries. It's a lot of stuff going on, and yet they've always consistently pretty much won at least 55% of their games. And so I kind of told you, like, yeah, you know what, Vegas baked in the injuries. To your point, they didn't know this team was going to be that hurt last year. I think they would have been better last year. But the more important part is, I don't think they're going to have the year from hell this year too, because it's really hard to be that hurt. I think they will be hurt. I think Jimmy Butler misses 10 to 15 games just right away. You put that in, you bake that into the Jimmy Butler experience. But if you get a more engaged Jimmy Butler when he is healthy and he's out there, and he's slightly more healthy and slightly more out there, and you just get better health luck up and down the roster, a full year of Terry Rozier, development from these young guys that we've already talked about, I feel really good about them winning at least 45 games, which would put them firmly in the over.
The extended offseason, I mean, it's going to help, right? I mean, even
That's
as
a
we're
good point,
talking
too.
about this, I'm just thinking to myself, was it a mistake for Bam to join Team USA?
No, absolutely not. Remember how good he was after the first stint with Team USA? If anything, it's going to make him better. He's going to be what we talked about on yesterday's episode.
Yeah.
He's got the 3-point shot. He's got the Team USA experience. He's going to be motivated coming off.
But
this
he's
gold medal.
also talked about, wanting to preserve himself, and part of that is taking July and August off so that you don't have to be pushing yourself and going up against high level competition.
Do you think that, where would you put the Olympics? Where would you rank it within these three things in terms of like the grind? Miami Pro-Am, which he probably would have been doing if he wasn't doing the Olympics.
Fair enough.
Or an NBA Finals run from April to mid-June, which is what he was coming off of in 2023 going into this past season.
I think it's sandwiched in between those. And
Yes.
Just because the competition is as tough, I believe that. At the same time, it's also the finals run is so nonstop after the 82-game season. In this case, he at the very least had 2 months off before he had to fight in Vegas and start training with LeBron and the boys. So I think it's a little different. But yeah,
the finals run almost like is compounding on everything that you're already going through. Where
your knees sore in April, wait till you get to June because your knees you're not going to feel them at all. That kind of thing.
No, okay. So you and I have the over, and we feel pretty good about it. I would go so far as to lock it in. Like this, I teased going into the segment. There's an easy way to make some money on the Heat. The odds are out there for you. You can use our promo code. It's up there on FanDuel. Like I'm locking that thing in. 44.5 wins.
45 wins. 45 wins. That's what they're getting. 45 and 37.
We're not going to make our wins prediction yet because I feel like we have a prediction episode somewhere in our future, but I feel good about the over. Now, there's over-unders out for the other teams in the East. How does Miami's over-under compare to those other rivals? What does that mean for how the Heat are projected to finish next season? We'll talk about that next year on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You know what? If you don't feel like taking a gamble on something, Game Time's got you covered. Why? Because they've got the best option for buying tickets you might be looking for with their killer last-minute deals. They're all in prices. The views from your seat feature the lowest price guarantee, all that and more. That's what makes Game Time the best place to get your tickets for Major League Baseball, concerts, comedy shows, whatever you're looking for, WNBA action, Heat games later on this year, whatever you might be seeking, you'll find it at Game Time. And I mentioned this before. Sometimes you're not sure that you have time available to buy tickets. All of a sudden you're traveling. Maybe you're going out of town. You're there for business. Your meeting ends early. You've got a couple hours on the town. You're not sure what to do. Guess what? You go to Game Time, see if there's anything playing there, maybe a concert for your favorite band, or maybe a comedy, a comedian that you haven't seen before, want to see again. Go there, maybe even a local baseball game. And I love the baseball option because you know what? After first pitch, it's a decided option right there where you can get the last minute tickets and you'll get the best prices right away. And you know exactly what you're paying because of they're all in pricing. So you don't have to worry about any surprise fees at the end. And you just get the tickets, and next thing you know, you're on Easy Street enjoying your night. So download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You get $20 off your first purchase. Terms will apply, but create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. Let us know in the comments section what you think about Miami's over-under. 44.5 wins, according to FanDuel. Are you going over? Are you going under? You can also follow us on your favorite podcast app. Let's look at some of the other teams in the East. Their over-unders. Boston, no surprise here. They're over-under 58.5. 58.5. Do you want to kind of just do like a blink kind of, do you like the over or the under on these as I kind of read through some of these East teams?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, 15.5 for Boston.
I'm going to take the under on that.
So they won 64 games last year. So you think they're going to lose? Oh, I put myself in position to do math. 7 games, 6 games,
Something like that. Yeah.
All right, fair.
I don't think they're catching as many people by surprise. I think Drew, Derek White, and Jason Tatum playing for the Olympic team again is going to be a little bit more arduous. Coming after a finals run as well. So not only is it the 82-game regular season when they won 64 games, but they had that finals run, and now they're traveling to Paris, and now they're going to be doing this. I just think it adds up after a while, and I think you're going to experience a lot. I'm not saying they won't make another finals run because I think they're certainly stacked to do that. But if you're counting on Porzingis being your healthiest player because Latvia is not in the playoff in the Olympics, I don't know if that's necessarily a guarantee that you're going to win a lot of games. I think it's just going to, again, it's going to be something that takes its toll. They could still win 57 games and win the East.
Right. That's true. I think I'm with you. I kind of like the undervalue there. Not only because, like you said, the Celtics are coming off of a finals run where they've had to play basketball for a really long time, but now 3 of these guys are in the Olympics, and one of them's complaining about not being there. And and I also think part of this too is they had great injury luck last regular season, and just kind of the opposite of what we're talking about with Miami, where they had the worst injury luck. Like, how does that happen twice in a row? Maybe you don't factor in as good injury luck, and maybe there's a reason for it because of the wear and tear on this thing. And also, they just won the championship. They don't have as much to prove. A lot of these teams, we saw that with the Big Three Heat. You go out and win 66 games or whatever it was in 2012, and then you're like, you know what? We could be the 3rd team in the East. It doesn't matter because we're here for the playoffs. We already have gotten the proof of concept we need. We don't need to prove that in the regular season. So maybe they're just a little bit less motivated. Okay. The Knicks are 53.5, over or under. Just give me over under. We don't need to do a whole explainer.
Over.
I like over too. They have a good formula. Tibbs just plays his guys a ton of minutes. That usually leads to regular season wins. Philadelphia.
You know what? I'm going
52.5.
under. I'm going under. Philadelphia over.
Philadelphia over 52.5. I like Philadelphia on the over too. I think they can end up winning the East. I just think that trio makes a lot of sense. And Joel Embiid, as long as he stays healthy in the regular season, like that's the whole big thing. His problem is not being healthy in the postseason. That was a lot of games he's missed for a regular season last year. So I think they'll go over that. Milwaukee 50.5.
Over.
I'll go over too. I think they'll be better. Indiana 47.5.
I'll take even odds on that one. I mean, 47.
Well,
I guess you have to go.
47.5 games.
All right, fine. I think that. I guess the over on that. I could see him at 48 wins.
Go with your heart. Yeah. Who doesn't like Tyrese Halliburton? They're one of those
Steve
teams.
Kerr don't, apparently.
Well, that's fair. They're one of those teams that even though you have them on tape, they're still really hard to prepare for because you don't feel the speed until you're playing them, and they play faster than literally anybody else in the league. And it's just like it's one of those sort of Cinderella type teams in March Madness where you're just like, whoa, what's going on? They're putting up 53 pointers and they're running off of makes and misses. It's
full
just,
season of
it's weird.
Siakam.
That's true too. Cleveland 47.5.
Under.
I'm going over. Feel good about them.
Well, you'd be going over on a lot of teams. Somebody's going to have to take the loss.
Well, I went under on Boston with you.
Fair enough.
I also think the East is pretty much have and have nots. I think a lot of these teams could go over because a lot of the bad teams are just going to win 23 games. It's, they're just going to beat up on the bad teams.
Who's worse though? Like who's worse? Like who's the?
What do you mean?
Who's the bad teams in the East? I think Charlotte got better.
Charlotte got a little bit better. They won 21 games last year. They're going to win 31 games, best case scenario this year.
That's a big difference there.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Wins.
It's 10 wins. Brooklyn, they're tanking. Chicago seems to be going in the other direction. I think Atlanta and Charlotte are the teams that would be better, a little bit better. But Toronto's going to be bad. Washington and Detroit are still going to be bad. I don't see things changing much for those teams. Maybe not 15 wins, but like 20 wins? Are we talking about that much of a difference? That's why I think all these teams at the top are going to just beat up on those teams at the bottom. And that's why they can maybe all hit these overs. But
It's interesting.
Orlando 47.5. That's the other one.
Oof, that's rough.
They won 47 games last year. That seems pretty high. I'm going to go under on that.
You think they'll win less than 47.5?
They won 47 last year, and it felt like it was a pretty good year for them.
Yeah, but they added KCP too.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Over on that.
You go over. I'll go under. I still feel good about under. I think they'll be better, but win fewer games, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams, 7 teams with better over/under markers than the Heat. Yeah. The Heat are at 44.5, and they're kind of the last team in that zone. And then everybody's down at like 40, 35 in the 20s.
So 500 or better, yeah.
FanDuel has 8 teams that are better than 500, according to their over/unders. And Miami pretty firmly the 8th team in that group. What do you think about so if it's up to FanDuel, they rank the Heat as the 8th best team in the East.
Yeah, same thing. I mean, basically a play-in team, and you have to, again, as we talked about, I mean, Miami has to hope that they can avoid injuries, that Terry Rozier for a full season will be inspired. It's Jimmy Butler will play engaged basketball, that everybody takes a leap up. And if that's the case, maybe they can climb their way to 5th, 6th. That's improvement. I don't know if it's what Heat fans might want, but it's still improvement. And then you kind of bank on being able to unlock something in the playoffs and maybe duplicate that run from a couple of years ago.
My 2 locks are Miami over 44.5 and Milwaukee over 50.5. Milwaukee won 49 games last year, and very much like the Heat, you couldn't have asked for a worse season in terms of the context of everything. Just feels like the Bucks have
Doc,
to be.
huh?
You get Doc Rivers for a full year. You have your knocks on Doc Rivers.
That's in the playoffs.
He's in the playoffs, right? He's a regular season wins machine. Giannis is awesome. I think we've all forgotten how awesome Giannis is, and I think him and Dame will be better now that they're not just being thrown together at the end of training camp or at the very beginning of training camp. They have a full year and stuff. I actually like their moves. They weren't huge, but Taurean Prince,
like Gary
Trent, one other guy that they added, but they're all Darrell, right?
Darrell,
yeah, all better than the 3 guys that they replaced. So you're asking me that can they win 2 more games than they did last year?
Yeah,
3 more games, fair. I guess. Yeah, 100%. So, those are my 2 locks. Everybody else, who knows? That'll do it for us today. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.